Welcome to Amtgard Leadership University, Gathering the Clans at 2016. This panel is going to be all about ethical leadership. Obviously, leaders can get in trouble very quickly whenever they start going maybe a little bit astray to what would be considered ethical behavior. It's not something we often talk about it, but it's a great opportunity just to do a quick gut check to leaders to make sure that they're on track, maybe with the expectations of their people and with the value systems and the values of their people and those that they're representing. As with every Amtgard Leadership University panel, I'm just going to ask when we get things started, start from my left, moving to my right, a brief introduction about yourself. Give a little bit of a context on why you're spending some time with us today, what you plan to bring to the table and to the team here, and then maybe a point or two that you want to make sure that we cover as we go through the next hour together. So Juju, we'll start with you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Juju Hexmojo. I've been in the game for quite a while, I guess upwards of 20 years, something like that. Let's say context. I've been monarch of my kingdom, and I was the Amtgard Ombudsman, one of the three after Goldcrest. Stuff to bring to the table today. I'm not really sure. I just think that it's a really great topic to talk about, and I feel that something that needs to be looked at a lot more. So I'm looking forward to, not to deflect the question or anything, but I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of the discussion, because I think it's a great place to start. So
great, I am too. Promethea?
I'm Promethea Kintsugi. I'm from Goldenvale, and I'm here because I served a term as the ombudsman as well. I'm also hoping to get a lot out of the discussion, because I think we don't hold our leaders accountable all the time for the things they do, and I think this might be a great resource for people to see when they're coming into even just local offices.
Casca?
I'm Casca. I'm from the Iron Mountains. I've been in any number of leadership positions in Amtgard. I certainly couldn't count them at this point. And in my real world experience, I'm a healthcare professional, so my background is in medical ethics.
Ormar Svensson. I've been playing for approximately 5 years now, from the Kingdom of Rivermore, current monarch, and have also served as Prime Minister, champion, and a few other offices. One thing that I really do want to bring to the table today, at least with this discussion, is advocacy, at least in the leadership role. And I feel that ethical leadership as a whole, that's going to kind of touch on that topic. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Again, just a little bit of housekeeping. Do me a quick favor. Remember that you're not just speaking to me, because I have the benefit of being in the front row. We're talking all the way to the folks in the back row back there, and so the microphones and stuff can make sure that we get this thing spread across the online community as well. Casca, we're going to start with you. When we say ethical leadership, what do we mean? What is ethical leadership?
Well, ethics itself is the study of how good and the concepts of good and evil in their place in society. Ethical leadership is the attempt to apply that moral compass to how you lead and how you develop that covenantal relationship between you as a leader and the people that you are doing fulfilling this responsibility for.
Okay, does anybody want to add to that? Is that a good place to start?
I feel that's a very good place to start. Overall, the ultimate idea is that you are looking for the best outcome, or looking into the best interest of those you are leading. And it's not just those who voted you into office, but everyone that you are leading, the entire group. You're making sure that everyone's voice is heard and understood and then represented, and that the outcome is based on that.
Okay, so I think we're all in a mindset that everybody wants to demonstrate or be an ethical leader. So Promethea, how do I demonstrate that? How do I be an ethical leader?
I mean, a lot of it is you can't teach someone a moral compass per se. People have their own personal understandings of what good and evil are, but you can, in Amtgard in particular, you can kind of gather it by consensus. Your players are not dumb by any means, and you can get that sort of feel from talking to people around you and asking, what would you do in this situation, and sort of come to a consensus on what to do. So even if you're not the best at knowing what right and wrong is for the most people, you can sort of arrive at that conclusion.
Juju, you want to add to that, sir?
Yeah, I think lately, just gonna go off that, I've been thinking a lot about integrity. I think integrity is a really big thing that people don't really think about very much. And when I talk about integrity, really the main thing with that is being rigorously honest, and rigorously honest not only with other people but with yourself or myself. And that takes a lot of kind of self knowledge or like kind of self-seeking. But once you can start speaking with integrity and being honest and doing the things that you say you're going to do, and having that kind of like my external actions match my internal moral compass, that it just kind of falls into place almost on its own. So I think that's probably what I would bounce off of that.
Anything to add?
Yeah.
We good? Start there. Okay. So we talked a little bit about acting with integrity, knowing the people and sort of where they're going toward, trying to come up with a consensus, almost if you will, of what the good and evil is for my group. Since we're going with that to help build a little bit of a leadership moral compass, if it's not my own personal moral compass, right? What are some signs that maybe I've got a leader? So let's talk about maybe the easy thing. How do you know when you've gone astray? How do I start to witness? What are some indicators maybe? If we start from that and trying to build the bookends, if you will, and then we can talk about the gray, which is the challenge.
So I understand the question correctly. We're talking about in ourselves, correct? Whenever we're in these leadership roles, or perhaps identifying it that in
identifying it in someone else.
Okay.
And then we trust an introspection to say, oh, I'm that person.
Absolutely. So in that particular, you want to at least communicate and identify with everyone that you are leading, and kind of get their perspective on what's going on. Generally, they're going to have their own idea of what's right and wrong. Obviously, we've discussed that already. And they're going to be able to identify what they feel is a problem in those leaders where they may not be representing them correctly, or they're doing things that they don't exactly agree with. So validating the criticism of your populace as a whole whenever you're in those leadership positions. So not so much just whenever you're in the leadership position, but keeping an ear open for whenever others are making those criticisms, and then taking those into account and then bringing them forward and actually having those topics brought forward and talked about with the leadership in power. So whether it's yourself talking about it amongst yourself, like internally saying, hey, no, I need to really look into this problem that others have brought up, validating it and seeing if it actually is a problem, and then moving forward from there to try to find a resolution.
What are some risky areas, Casca, in ethics and Amtgard leadership? Maybe that can help us have that gray area conversation. Where can we go awry?
A lot of those risky behaviors come down to things that are the big conversations in society at large. So you have like how to treat other people, what counts as a sexist comment, for example, or prejudice in any way, or things like how others perceive each other. Those are always the areas that cause the greatest conflict. And because we all have difficulties understanding how rich the experiences of other people are as compared to our own. I can't see inside your head, I can't see inside his. I don't know what his life experiences are, I only know mine. But it's natural human nature to assume that my experiences are richer. And so that's where conflicts start to arise. As soon as we get into our own heads that we know more, we are devaluing the experiences of others and creating a point where there can be a misunderstanding.
Okay, let's plain speak that a little bit when you're done with your drink. So I'm a young leader. I'm interested in leadership. I want to be the best leader I can possibly be, but I'm also young. Can you articulate that maybe for a young 16 to 19-year-old leader? What exactly you mean?
Everyone feels that they are the protagonist in their own story. So the guy that you're having a problem with on the field, being too fighty and hitting people too hard or whatever it is, he doesn't think he's doing wrong because he's the good guy in his story and you might be the villain. And you have to really try to step into the other person's shoes and truly understand them. That is the key to resolving most conflicts, and that's the key to leading a group of people, is to truly try to understand what those people want.
How can I do that, Promethea? How can I learn to walk in somebody else's shoes? Any tips?
I mean, like, the first thing that comes to mind is just to remember that, like, just because you don't subscribe to a certain set of feelings doesn't mean they're not valid. So, like, thinking of a young Park and, like, going off the example of somebody being too aggressive with fighting, you have to approach it from, like, their feeling perspective as well. So you have to empathize with them and think, like, okay, I'm going to approach them and say, I don't like the way you're doing this because people have been complaining to me, and that person is naturally going to react to you with, like, well, why? Like, I don't understand. You have to remember that just because you don't subscribe to feelings doesn't mean they're not completely valid. So having empathy, and I'm fully aware, being sort of an over empathetic person, that, like, not everybody has my level of empathy. Just definitely trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is a good first step. And involving somebody, if you know somebody is more moderate than you and has a good person to bounce feedback off of, it's okay to go to another person and say, like, I need you to be my compass a little bit because I feel this guy is wrong. But I feel like by the way that I myself am getting so worked up, that it's very likely that I might be in the wrong as well. If you get strong emotions about something, it's always good to get somebody else involved to help you temper them. Otherwise, you're going to be the protagonist, they're going to be the villain, and you're just going to keep having problems indefinitely.
Juju, how do I do that? I mean, I'm right? My moral compass is telling me that I'm right, that this is the behavior, this is the path that everybody needs to take. How do I give an inch without losing my experiences that I do hold? So how do I do that?
Well, I think it's important to, as a part of getting into someone else's shoes, that when we communicate and we share something about ourselves and with another person, it brings down walls. And I think learning someone's motivations for why they're doing something, maybe they're fighting, maybe they're punching people on the field. If I can talk to that person and say, why are you doing this? And understand it and try to come to some sort of an understanding about what are the motivations. Because a lot of times I feel like as you start percolating through the reasons, well, I'm punchy because this guy pissed me off. Well, why did he piss you off? Well, because he did this other thing. And you can start kind of filtering down and kind of sieving out reasons. And they're often really understandable motives that I have too. And I know exactly what this guy is feeling because I've been there. And I think that is a great place to start as to start steering things in a different direction, because you can say, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe there's another way we can approach this problem. Maybe we can start finding pushing it in a different direction. So I don't know if that actually answered your question. I might have taken it in a different way, but I think that's kind of where I'm at. So.
Okay. Ormar, you want to elaborate on that?
If we can, we'll get back to the original question of it. I just want to kind of recover it again because.
Sure. So agreeing that everybody has different life experiences, everybody's got a different moral compass, if you will. But I'm in charge right now. How do I yield a little bit? Or when do I know it's okay to yield a little bit without getting lost in it? Because again, in my mind, I'm right. What are some tips for being able to do that and being able to relate to without either A, getting lost in it, or B, just getting so utterly frustrated that I refuse to lead because so-and-so won't listen to me?
So as a whole, empathy is frustrating because whenever you're trying to understand another individual, again, in their mind, they're correct. In your mind, you're correct. So balancing out those two perspectives can be difficult. So understanding that you're probably going to already have difficulty trying to understand another person's perspective is going to kind of help you take a step back and recognize your own frustrations when discussing with them their problems or their issues. As you expand and discuss with them what their problems may be or what motivates those particular issues, you can start to relate. So outwardly, they might be doing that thing, hitting people harder on the field, sloughing every once in a while, or saying very rude and obnoxious things to other people. But as you discuss with them why they do those things, you might be able to break down some sort of familiarity with why they do it. And then once you've established empathy, or you at least can see where they're coming from because you might have some of those same frustrations, you can start working towards a resolution of, well, hey, here's some of the things that I do in those particular situations. They may be right in what they're doing based on their experiences, based on what their upbringing has taught them they're supposed to do in those environments. Share what you do based on your experiences with them, or reach out to other people and get their perspectives as well as to what they would do to resolve those conflicts. So it's breaking it down and trying to find what the actual source of the problem is can help you finding what that resolution is, fixing the problem. So how do you not get frustrated, and how do you not get, is just communicating the entire time, talking with those individuals, not just the person that has the problem, but those around them. Maybe somebody who's uninvolved entirely, that can kind of be a cornerstone for you. So that way you don't get lost in it and start feeling either too empathetic for that person and now your perspective is completely askew. But having somebody that you can go back to and discuss those things about, removing emotion entirely and just talking about the facts of what had happened. So interacting with the individual, yes, but then also having somebody else that you can go to and interact with that doesn't involve emotion, that just is the facts of what's going on. And that can kind of help you keep grounded with coming to that resolution too. This resolution may work really well for that person, but it's based solely on emotion. Where if you go back and you look at the facts of it and you look at the full perspective, you might be able to make a decision that includes emotion for that person, so it's good for them, but also includes the perspective of others around you and overall what's better for the entire organization. So it is frustrating. It is hard. It's not easy. Doing that is not easy. And I think that's probably something that new leaders should understand too. So seeking help and talking to other people about it, recommend that too.
To tack onto that really fast, when I was the ombudsman, one of the things that I found was the most helpful tool that I developed was talking to somebody else and stripping out all the emotion that I felt and repeating the facts as if I were trying to make that person make their decision for the first time. It's an exercise that I'd never done before as like the leader of a park, but to take, no matter which way I was already leaning in, like the decision I was going to make, having to tell a third party and just tell them in like the simplest facts and then being like, what do you think about it? Was a really good centering way to like remember what was going on and what like the root of the circumstance was.
Reiteration is a really great tool in addition to, like Juju said, questioning so that you understand and communicating so you understand. But one thing else to remember as a leader is you can't make someone change by just telling them to do. Hey, you did this thing wrong. Stop it. They're not going to listen to you. But one way you can change people is by once you get down to the heart of the matter and you understand, then you can create doubt. You can go, oh, so you feel this way because of these aspects. If these aspects were different in this other way, what would your behavior be like then? Would this thing go away? And that forces the individual to reevaluate in order to answer your question. But it does so in a very respectful way because you're taking their feelings into account.
Okay, great. I really appreciate the exercise, the food for thought there. Casca, let's talk about group though. We talked about leadership in the group, so it's nice to be able to pull somebody off side to side. You spend some time talking about issue. What about whenever it's a group? Maybe it's an entire Amtgard group, maybe it's a household, maybe it's just a group of friends. How do you deal with that kind of challenges? Because we group together, right? So sometimes this group's more accomplished, maybe going left, these folks may be going right. How do we start bridging some group gaps?
It's unfortunate that leaders often have more information than the people they lead. There is, especially when you're dealing with conflicts, there's a certain amount of, you have to respect the individual, the privacy of the individuals involved. And so you can only give the whole group a limited amount of information. The best thing to do is try to give them as much information as all the parties who are involved with feel comfortable with being disclosed publicly, and try to, ultimately people do want to be rational and reasonable. I mean, it may not seem like that at times, but people do want to do right. So if you give them enough information to make them see where you're coming from, usually people will, if they don't agree with you, at least respect the decision you made. And so generally, as much transparency as you can get away with will help the group to understand why things are the way they are.
Juju, how do I do that as a leader? Your experience as an ombudsman, how do I have transparency on a decision that was made while also respecting the privacy of the individuals involved? You know, they may want to share all the business. They may want to share none of it.
Well, you can't control other people. So if someone else wants to, air out their dirty laundry, you can't really stop that. That's a good question. I think that there is a level of, well, just being, and this might go back to the integrity thing, but if I'm a monarch, it's really good to come out and say, this is what's happening, and just state the fact and not get into any nitty gritty, but these are the things that happened that people need to know about. This is the result. This is what we're going to do. Moving forward, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and really just leave it at that. I think that's been my experience with it. As for other people, then, you can discuss details with individuals if they need to know. But I really think that getting ahead of things and just being transparent from the beginning and saying, these guys are causing a problem. We had to do, this resolution, and really just being forthright and honest from the beginning. I think that people can get into trouble by, say, not saying anything, or just like kind of trying to do things under the table just because they might feel that it would cause more problems. They don't want to cause drama or whatever. But if you're not forthright and honest from the beginning, it just leads to speculation, and that causes even more drama. And really, you want to just kind of like tone down the drama and keep people from speculating. So it's the best thing to do is just come out and say, we're doing this, and this is what happened. So I think that's.
Omar, what do I do when that's not enough for some players? They want it all and they want to know it now. Facebook gives them a pulpit.
So I'll expand on that as well in answering
Sure.
my question, but I also do want to expand kind of on how you
Please.
deal with it as a group. When you're in a leadership role, yes, your responsibility is the perspective of all those you're leading, but there's also your duty in office. We're a part of a nonprofit organization. We have things that we have to follow through on, rules that we have to follow, guidelines that we have to see through. There are laws that we have to abide by. And fortunately for us, there are a lot of guidelines already in place that kind of tell us how we're supposed to do certain things. And those are great roadmaps. For those who aren't aware, there's only certain types of information that we're even allowed to give out in the first place. It's not our duty or responsibility to hand out more than a certain amount of information. For those who are interested in finding that, looking at Privacy Act 1974, that's a great guideline for when in an organization what you're supposed to do concerning privacy on a matter. When we talk about transparency and privacy, there are some things we just can't spread or share, just because sharing those things, that kind of gets over into someone's own rights with privacy. So it's important to keep that in mind whenever you're dealing with these particular situations, especially ones that are a lot scarier when it comes to sexual crime or assault or worse. So that's one of the first things I want to kind of touch on before we get on to the next part. So apologize. Can you re-ask your question again?
Sure.
Just because my
So,
brain gets off.
How do
Yeah.
I deal with those players, members, whatever title you want to give them, that want more information, that are really pushing for it, and or using that against you? You know, just the struggles of leadership. Hey, I made this decision. That's not good enough for me because you X. What are some tips for dealing with that player?
This kind of gets into the role of you as a leadership, in a leadership position, and you as a leader of dealing with people and kind of standing your ground with what decisions you've made. This is what we're giving. This is what information you get. That's it. There is no, you don't get more. This is what you're entitled to. We've given you as much as we can in the fairness of what you deserve to know as a member of this organization. But at the same time, their privacy must be considered as well. And for that reason, we're not expanding on the details. Unfortunately, you just can't get more. I apologize. I know it's frustrating. You want to know more information, but it's not your right. And I think as long as you maintain that this is why we're doing it, this is out of respect for their privacy, and then hold that line and don't let it budge, you won't have a lot of problems with it. If you're transparent from the start and you're honest and open with them with why you're doing what you're doing, a lot of people are going to respect that in the first place, because generally, whenever you're candid with somebody, they like that. People don't like beating around the bush to get information. When you're honest with them from the start, as Juju was mentioning, people respect that. So when they ask for more information, you tell them, no, this is out of respect for another person, and you stay that ground, people will respect that.
Does anybody else want to?
I think like the one thing to consider too is like, I know that from my own experiences, when you are a leader in Amtgard, there's like a fear that like your decision making will make you unpopular. And I think like an important thing to remember is that your decision making might make you unpopular with a group of people, but you're still making the right decision. And like you should feel confident in like the choices you make. If you made them with as much information as you can get and you made that decision, you should feel good standing by it because you did what was best for all parties. And like it may seem scary to do, but it's still very important to do. And it's so much better than doing nothing, which is what can happen in a park if you're not willing to just like take that responsibility as a leader.
And that's a really important point to make. If some of your decisions are going to make you unpopular and people aren't going to like them, that doesn't necessarily make your decision less good. And you may want to change your mind because you want to be liked. Most everyone likes to be liked. But in the end, you have to sleep at night. And no one else is going to tell you to sleep at night. No one else is going to go, we like you a whole lot. You should sleep at night. No, you're going to have to live with that decision. So live with it. Just suck it up and stand your ground. If it's the right thing to do, do it. Even if everyone hates you for it.
You mentioned earlier that you've got history in medical ethics. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the applicability of HIPAA and resources people can learn on what they can and can't talk about?
Yeah. Actually, there's a number of different governmental websites that will go over HIPAA regulations for you. And it's basically, way down underneath it all, HIPAA is do not give out any information that could disclose the identity of an individual. Because it's not anyone else's business what's going on in that person's life. And like you said, the Privacy Act of '74 is also very readily available on, just Google it. It's a quick read, it's pretty easy to understand. But it's just about respecting people's privacy and their agency to live their own life without having every bit of their business out there in the world.
Juju, how do you, as a leader, deal with the trending social issues that may have ethical implications? The examples included religious differences, hey, we want to have a feast in this church. I'm not stepping foot in a church, those kinds of things. Maybe transgender rights, other ethnicities, all around. What's the role of an Amtgard leader in those kinds of, issues or matters?
Well, I think it's important to do the right thing and always be doing the next right thing. And regarding the specific issues, I'd say that Amtgard, we're an inclusive place, and at the same time, I think that it's a very secular place. There are households that have, religious attachments to them. There are, other households that are, have deal with gender issues. For me, I think that's one of the best things about Amtgard, that we're just like a wonderful hodgepodge of a bunch of weirdos. And we all have the same, we all like to dress up funny and hit each other with sticks in the mountains of New Mexico. And that's really what Amtgard is about. And I tend to, suggest that people don't worry about the rest. Because it's not my business what any of these people do. I do think that that Amtgard should, be open and welcoming to everybody. And so, if people cause problems with that and begin, say, segregating out a certain group of people because, maybe they're following a different religion, or maybe they, like to go in different bathrooms or whatever, then that is a problem. And it's a serious problem that needs to be addressed and kind of shut down. Because we're not about shutting people out of the game. We're not about, discriminating against people. So I think that's kind of where I would go with it. And what I would do about that is I think that it's important to have a discussion, and to bring out like reasons and issues if it becomes, a problem, and talk about it. Because I think one of the main things that why people have problems with transgender issues, with religions, with whatever, is lack of familiarity and ignorance. And so the more we can shine a light on it, I've used this, I've said this before in a different meeting, but we're talking about the shooting in Orlando. And I realized that ignorance is like roaches, and it grows in, they go crazy in a dark place with dirty dishes. And when you shine a light on that ignorance and click on the light and start talking about things and educating people, then the roaches go away. They run. And you can then start doing things really useful, like cleaning your dishes and mopping the floor, making sure the roaches don't come back. So I think that's a really roundabout, very metaphorical, kind of crazy way to talk about the issue. And I hope it made some sense. But I think that's kind of like the direction I would go with that question. So I hope I answered it.
Okay, you did. And we're going to transition a little bit into the complaint department. And Promethea, you gave a good example earlier about trying to eliminate the emotion, get rid of the static that sometimes I call it. What are some other tips? Who's got some tips for that first-time leader that all of a sudden there's a complaint? Somebody's making it hostile. Wow, that can be difficult. Somebody put their hands where they didn't need to be in a possibly sexual manner. Ormar, you're leading a shire for the first time. You just got hit with this. What do you do? Do you have a role in that conversation? And what do you do?
Absolutely. So if you find yourself in a leadership position where you have something like this happen, where sexual assault takes place, first off, the person complaining, whether they're the victim or even a bystander, you have to take everything that they say seriously. You have to validate what they've said, and all of it. whether it's write it all down, whichever. Talk to the person, get what information you can from them, and be very open with accepting. Don't shut them down. That conversation's not the place for slang, not the place for jokes, not the place for really any humor. You need to be very honest and very serious with the topic. Now, you don't have to be overly serious. You don't have to be like, we have to do something now about it. You know, don't have to pull out the pitchforks or anything like that. But just be very, very calm, open, and encouraging that person to share as much information that they're willing to. And it's very important that I say willing to. Don't coerce more information out of them than what they want to give, especially if they're in the victim role. From there, obviously, like, I feel it is good to always have at least, on the kingdom level, it's fortunate you have the Guildmaster of Reeves and you have the Prime Minister that serve in a role where the three of you can make a code of conduct decision if that's needed. Having the three of you as part of that conversation helps, because you can have it to where you functionally work with the individuals. You have two other people that are offset that you can bring this information back to, completely removed from the emotions, which we've already explained. That's a very big part of any sort of complaint department. Emotions are involved. People are passionate. So if you can remove those emotions and just talk about the facts of what happened with other individuals that are removed, that helps. So you've had the person come to you. They've made the complaint. You've heard them out. You've listened to what they have to say, and you've been very open and honest, like, with what you feel on it, to get as much as you can out of it. And then you've shared it with other individuals to kind of what move is next. From there, further investigating more individuals, talking to more individuals. You don't have to make it a full-on investigation. Your role is to try to make the decision that sees to the safety of everyone involved. So you don't have to condemn everyone. Your role is just to make sure that the game is safe. So if that means involving more people and talking to try to get more information, more perspective on what exactly has happened, do that. Seek it out. Talk to those individuals. If you have all the information that you need from one or two people, then step back and make your decision. I think the important part here, though, is that you need to be able to have those conversations with everybody involved. And if you can't, then find someone who can, and then remove yourself from the decision-making process, because you need to be there from beginning to end. And if you can't be there from beginning to end, you shouldn't be there.
Does anybody want to add to that? Maybe any other examples or drills like Promethea mentioned about taking that approach? Nothing comes to mind?
How about a less serious example? Because that a lot of people are scared of broaching that subject
Sure.
matter because it's pretty heavy stuff. So if we lay out the process in a more lighthearted way, maybe it'll make a little more sense and be a little less frightening. So let's say I don't like hugs. Say Promethea is a hugger, and she comes up and she always is like, yeah, Casca, and hugs me every time she sees me, and I don't like hugs, and he has to deal with it. And it's not a thing that's going to break up your party. It's a little tiny thing, but it's an interpersonal thing, and it's going to be a problem at least for those two individuals. Of course, you would end up taking each individual seriously, take what they're saying at face value, respect their opinions, and then eventually get to the point where you go, hey, each individual has autonomy. Maybe ask if you can hug first, or whatever escalation from that point. Because not everything's going to be solved with, hey, can you see why that person doesn't like it? You can? Awesome. And then a lot of your problems are going to be that easy to solve. It's just going to be a quick 1 or 2 sentence conversation. They're going to get it. Not everything's going to be, hey, do you want the police involved? What's your comfort level? Not everything's going to be that level of serious.
Fortunately.
Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Is there ever a serious, and we're going to move past this to maybe more common events in a moment, but when does Amtgard call the cops versus a player expected to call the cops?
If it's something that violates the laws of the state or province that you are in, you need to be speaking to the police, even if it's just your group, like a representative from your group of the monarchy goes to the police and says, hey, this happened, the person who told me about it is here, you might want to speak to them, and let that person decide what their comfort level is. We can't force people to go to the police and press a criminal case. We can protect ourselves by going to the police and saying, this happened, we know that it's going to be a problem, and starting a paper trail, because there may be a point where that person changes their mind and decides they do want to go after that other person and say, like, I want to solve this problem forever. It seems like a really scary thing to say, like, we need to be involving the police, because I know, at least in my kingdom, we didn't do that for a number of years, because that just wasn't what you did. You solved it in-house. But there comes a time where it's just unacceptable for certain people to be playing in the area that you're in. And by going there, you make sure you take responsibility for your people and for the site and place that you're on, and make sure, again, that you set it up in case something else happens later.
And just so that I know the context and there's no confusion on the videotaping or the audience, I know we went heavy on the previous conversation, but this one, I think somebody stole my cell phone.
Yeah.
I think somebody stole my stuff.
Yep.
Any of that?
Yeah.
You were okay. I just want to make sure again we're on the same place.
If it's something that, like, the person, like, there are times where the person will say, like, I'm gonna go to sexual assault again because it's like it's a raging topic in my kingdom right now. But, like, if somebody comes up to you and says, I don't want to press charges, you're still obligated to go to the police. I know that it feels like uncomfortable. That person doesn't have to speak to the police if they feel uncomfortable, but, like, you're doing the right thing for the circumstance by doing that. If it's something like somebody took my sword and I found them with it, they don't want to give it back, maybe not that. But if somebody, like, we've had at our events, we've had people go into cars and take money. If you find out who that person is, that person needs to be out of your park or out of your site as fast as possible, because you don't want that kind of attitude can't stand.
Okay. Again, staying in the gray area of ethical items, and one of the last ones before we have to start wrapping things up. What about, again, back to groups and things like that, awards and recognition and family members or friends, or because obviously often more about, you said it, leaders often have more information. You know what the people around you are working on. You know what they're doing. You know the time they're putting into things. You know what I mean? How do you avoid the appearance of favoritism in that or other positive aspects of the game? Casca?
What I tend to do is I ask myself a question. Let's say it was for, I don't know, a dragon or something. And I'm looking at this piece of art. I go, if everyone in the kingdom saw this piece of art, would the majority of them say, yeah, this deserves a dragon? It doesn't matter who the person is. That takes the person out of it, even if it's my husband or my squire or something like that. You're taking that out of the equation and going, would the majority of people agree with me if I made this decision? Because that's the people that you're leading. You're leading this group, so you got to ask yourself: would the audience approve of seeing this award happen if they had all the information? And then, if the answer is yes, then don't do a disservice to that person that you're friends or loved ones with by not doing your job. You do your job, even though it's hard. You just make sure, again, going back to the communication thing, you tell the audience why. You go, hey, I'm giving my husband such and such an award because of these things. And if anyone else in the audience saw those things, they're going to know, and they're going to tell other people that it's fine. So you just be communicative and make sure you're doing what your populace wants for that sort of thing, that you're meeting their standards.
Anybody else want to?
Going off of that, I'd say that I think that's one of the great benefits of award standardization, is that we have a codified thing that says this is what each award is. Now, some of those things are a little fuzzy, like, roses, whatever. Those can be kind of weird. But still, I think that there's it's delineated and written down. And I think if you look at that and follow as best you can, and then do what Casca said and say, is this really, worthy of whatever, then it's hard to really go wrong.
To add on that, whenever you're giving those awards, open up on why you're giving them. Talk about it. Explain what the award is. Reference the award standardization, as he mentioned, and tell the populace why you're giving this award. Reference what that person's done and identify it and talk about it. When you're giving out lions, express that this is given for leadership service or above and beyond what that office might have been, or identify what that person has done that is that thing, and then grant that award. When people see and understand why you're giving that award, and they can also identify and kind of oh yeah, I remember when that person did that thing, then they can respect that you made that decision based off, one, the recommendation that maybe the populace had regarding that particular individual, and two, that you recognize what that individual did and then recognize them with an award. Regardless of who they are, if you're transparent with why you're doing it, people will respect that and generally agree with it.
Great. Okay. Thank you all for a nice thorough answer. Time is sadly coming to a close on obviously a conversation that deserves a lot more exploring, a lot more maybe specific, targeted conversations in future panels. So thank you all for opening the door, if you will, on the topic of ethical leadership for us. But it is time to wrap up. So again, in sticking with our ALU program, we'll just start over here with Juju. And if you would, just any closing comments. If we've got about 5 minutes and somebody only spent the last 5 minutes of this to watch it, what do you want to make sure they take away from this discussion?
Always act with integrity. Don't be a jackass. Shoot, I forgot my third one. What was my third
Well,
one?
they've got to come up with stuff also. So.
I'm not telling you mine.
The worst. All right. I'm going to go with those two for now.
Okay. Promethea?
I think don't be a jackass has to be said, and we said it in the last panel too. I just think you treat everybody with a little bit of kindness. It goes a long way, and it goes a long way into how you're viewed as a leader. But being a leader is all about making hard decisions, and you took this role because you thought you could make the hard decisions, and now you get to try it. And especially to younger players, you're not going to get it right the first time. I never got anything right the first time. But if you're willing to keep, asking other people for help and getting people who are older and more experienced than you to talk about it, you can build up a level of ability to do these kinds of things that seem impossible right now.
Great. Casca?
Have respect for other people, even if you don't agree with them. Go out of your way to empathize and understand, because that's the only way that you're ever going to truly come to a consensus with another person.
Ormar?
Everybody's made very great points. Ultimately, balance those things. Your empathy, the desires and needs of your people, your populace, with your responsibilities and duties as a leader or an officer in role. Remember that we do have guidelines we still have to maintain and follow, but at the same time, find the compromise with the needs and desires and perspectives of those that you're leading. They put you in office for a reason. Lead them and find that balancing point.
Great inputs and great takeaways. Thank you all for taking time from your event to spend an hour with us. Promethea, I know this is the second one in a row. You're looking forward to stretching your legs, I'm sure, but thank you all very much for taking the time to spend with us. And again, to open a door in a conversation that we need to be having. If I could, a quick round of applause for those in the panel. Big round of applause for the amazing volunteer team that stood up and takes care of the cameras and everything. And thank you for everybody watching online and that came in to attend with us today. Thanks, everybody.